Hey guys, this is Mallory Peterson here to discuss Chapter 9, Difficult Interactions for SPD 652. At first, reading about conflict management styles and difficult interactions, I know we've all been there, whether it's in education, whether it's family, just like whatever it might be. We've all dealt with tension, and between colleagues obviously is not, it's not fun, for the people that you work with, and no matter what the situation is, what level of education you're at, whether you've been teaching 30 years or you just finished your first year, we're always going to have issues, and so it's all a matter of how we decide to resolve these issues and how we deal with the conflict. Through reading about the 5 conflict management styles, I have to be honest when I say that I have been part of all 5 of these. There are 2 that I mainly, I see myself in, but I can say I've been part of all of these. So I'm just going to chat a little bit about each of those. The first conflict management style is competitiveness, and while, who doesn't like to win, right? So we all have this feeling, everybody wants to win, but yet in education we need to be team players, and we don't always win, and that's something that we have to recognize. I certainly think that there are times and situations where you can be competitive, especially in regards to ethical situations. But like the book stated, if there's too much competitiveness going on, it can damage relationships, collaboration groups, and everything like that. And we have to be honest, nobody really likes a one-upper, right? It's always who can be better, who can, who's gonna win this argument, and so forth. And that's just not our purpose in education. While we can have strong opinions and beliefs and what we feel is right, and so forth, there's still a level, or there's still a certain time where competitiveness can happen, but that should not be the style that we all choose. And while I can say I have been there, I have been in competitive situations, it is not one that fits me most. Avoidance is the next one, and I have to admit that I have dealt with conflict through avoidance, and I will say obviously that's not something that's dealt with. To me, the reason why I think I do that sometimes is because there are just some things I'm not going to let bother me, and I don't need to let get to me. However, things do bother me, and they do get to me if I don't talk about them. I am kind of that person that likes, I don't want to say likes to, but you need somebody who can address the elephant in the room. A lot of times people don't want to talk about things and have difficult conversations because they're scared or they don't want to voice opinions, but that is how we grow, and that's how we communicate and build rapport and collaboration. Not everything, you can have the best climate and culture in the world in your school, but I think the people with the best climates and the best culture are people who don't avoid each other and just want to let things go. So I know for me, I don't like when people are mad at me. I don't deal well with that. I don't sit well. I don't, if it was something that happened at a school day and I didn't deal with it before the end of the day or after school, it eats at me, and that is not my personality. But I also know that I need to have be a little more assertive sometimes instead of just avoiding. But again, I've been there, but it's not something that I would normally choose. Not a conflict management style that I would choose. These 2 I'm going to put together for the accommodative and compromising, because I would say that's where I am. And the reason, and I totally related to what the book said about most accommodative, conflict management styles are people who are specialists and so forth. As a HAL teacher, I travel to 3 different middle schools, and I work with 7th and 8th graders. So with that, I work with about 75 teachers at 3 buildings, 14 different teams, 6 administrators. Like, I am one that wants to have a good reputation. I don't want people, like when I'm in their building, to have a negative connotation about me. And so I oftentimes will do anything and everything to make others happy, just like the book stated, unfortunately. I ensure that their needs are met before my own. And so I know that that is something that I truly need to work on, because I'm just in a tough spot, I think. And when I was at the elementary level, I wasn't so much like that, because I was, one place. I taught 6th grade. Like, I wasn't traveling around and working with all different teachers every single week and so forth. So I definitely know that's me, and I know that it's something that I need to work on. But I also know that it's okay for certain situations. I just think I do too much of it. The next one that I know I relate to the most is compromising. And I am a true believer in doing what's acceptable for all, even if it's, a little bit about what I want, a little bit about, what somebody else wants, and we can just kind of put our heads together and figure out a good compromise there. So those are the 2 that I know I would consider my conflict management style at the moment, until, I can become stronger and kind of even out in all of these. The last one is consensus through collaboration. While we know that this is the end goal, and on page 216 it talks, it has the chart, the styles for resolving conflict and so forth. And we know, you want your high, your importance of relationship and the importance of the outcome. And consensus through collaboration is obviously top notch. It is what we should be doing, but just also like the text stated, it's not always the easiest. Sometimes you don't have all the time in the world. You don't have all of, okay, you brainstorm and I brainstorm. Like, sometimes you just have to make quick decisions about things, depending on what it is. But what I do love about it is that it promotes resolution. And sometimes, a lot of collaborating, while I think it's good and you should have multiple opinions and work through things, if there's too many people, depending on what the situation is, sometimes there's just too many, have you heard the term like too many chiefs? Too many people trying to voice their opinion and so forth. So it really just depends on the situation, but I do know that consensus through collaboration is something that I'm definitely, I've been part of, but I also need to work on, knowing that it is, I would say, probably the best conflict management style. On page 213 is where the causes of conflict come in, and knowing that I am more of a compromising person with my management style, sometimes it is really hard to compromise. And like I said, sometimes I just give in, and but if I have to be, something that's talked about a little bit later, if I'm like a mediator of a conversation, like I'm always trying to find balance and so forth. But with the first one, with conflict between individuals with different goals, this is where two people want different outcomes, but you have to come up with something of, that's the same, and settle for one thing that makes the most sense. And some people can be very, strongly opinionated, and some are more level-headed. But with this situation about the inclusion with the SPED students within the paragraphs there, I feel that the school is already kind of doing what's best. They are doing some inclusion, some, where the students are able to be with other general education students. So I feel that, they're already doing a little bit of both. So that's a good compromise, but I realize, the 3 parties involved with that situation are not, they have different goals. And something that I would suggest is, let's add a little bit more inclusion with our students with disabilities in the, in the general education setting. Let's make some short-term goals, and instead of something long-term, I wouldn't go like something with an IEP because those are usually yearly goals. Sometimes quarterly and things like that, but definitely short-term goals, and then like reevaluate it, come back together, let's see what's working. So yeah, it's definitely tough when there are multiple parties with they want different outcomes, but you have to settle on one thing that works the best. This second one, conflict with individuals with the same goal. In education, we should ideally all have the same goal, right? I mean, we're here to do what's best for kids, support students, and bring upon academic achievement and student success. And I feel like most educators would do anything that they have to in order to make those things happen. Just like the text said though, sometimes when there's different interest areas, like, there's ELL, there's SPED, there's general education, there's HAL or gifted services, sometimes you are toying with some different things. I feel like people with special services really want principals, just thinking back to the master example of the high school situation, specialist teachers want students like in a cluster grouping format, and research proves that to be a proven method of how we should differentiate for our kids and so forth. Just yesterday we have been pushing for cluster grouping for our high ability learners, and there was one principal at one of our schools who, we have been trying to nail this concept forever. And at a certain grade level, there are 3 gifted students and only 2 teachers. So 2 of the HAL students got put in one class and another student got put in the other class. And that just doesn't seem, like I'm a big fan of ability grouping, but I know not everyone is like that, and I know that's totally my opinion. But that is definitely, a conflict with, people wanting the same goals. And it's like, our HAL services, we want our students grouped together. ELL, they want their students grouped together, but sometimes that's not, it just doesn't work that way because the principal is ideally the one in charge in making the final decisions. So I definitely understand the individuals with same goals conflict, and and because I am a person who wants to compromise, you just have to try to balance and do the best you can with the decisions that principals make. Conflict about power is the third one, and I'm a firm believer that if your principal or administrator asks you to do something, you just do it. So like the example in the book about the RTI, like you were just placed on a team. You weren't given a choice, you weren't asked to. We don't always like everything, and we don't have to like everything, but sometimes I feel like if somebody is placing you on something without really even asking you, that might be a compliment to you, as in they trust you to do these things and so forth. It's going to stretch you and help you grow and all of these things. But sometimes there is a power struggle, and it could be with a student, it could be with a colleague, it could be with your administrator. Somebody who's more of a micromanager might just do things out of power, and I think we've all seen leaders like that. They feel like they have this authority, and sometimes there's definitely things wrong with that, and that's not okay. That's not a compromising style. That is not talking with people first and coming up with a solution. But what stinks, like thinking back a little bit to that RTI situation, if somebody doesn't want to be on that team, that is, they might struggle with the jobs that are assigned to them or the tasks and so forth because they're not in it because they wanted to. So that's definitely, that's definitely a situation that is not easy to compromise with, especially when, in my situation, I just kind of do what I'm told, but I know that's not okay if it's a consistent thing that somebody is doing with wanting to have power. The last cause of conflict that is listed is conflict within individuals. And I do think sometimes I struggle with my own goals and things like that, the way I perceive things. As a traveling HAL teacher, which I mentioned, I have over 200 students that I service across 3 middle schools. And I also work with about 75 teachers and 6 administrators. And so it is not always easy to balance myself. And just like, you know, what it says on page 215 under that category, you know, I am in conflict with myself about what strategies to implement and what things to do, and what I'm doing at one building, can I do it at the same building, and you know, like what I think is working for history at 7th grade at this school. You know, I always hope that, oh, I bet this 7th grade history teacher at this other school would love to implement the same idea. Well, that's not always the case. And so I just struggle sometimes within myself and my own goals about, you know, am I doing what's best? Am I communicating correctly? You know, scheduling is always something that is an issue. But so I definitely think though that compromise, like just going back to my conflict management style, that I have to sometimes just say that I am doing enough, because that is something I struggle with. I feel like I'm always like, what can I do more? What can I do next? And I like never say no. And so that's another conflict within myself that I need to try to utilize. And especially if I ever want to go into leadership, like I just need to be able to figure out, like, and weigh my options and figure out what I think is best within myself. Difficult interactions are never easy to deal with, but they do offer us a learning experience and opportunity. Some of the things that people can do to resolve conflict are, 2 of the things that were highlighted in the text are to negotiate responsibilities and to use a mediator. With negotiating responsibilities, this is, you know, not everything needs to go to a principal. You know, you don't have to have your principal solve everything. Educators are adults, and but they are also human beings, and I know that sometimes it does go to that kind of person that could mediate some issues. But negotiating is really just talking, communicating, figure those things out. And one of the biggest things that was listed in the text is to focus on the issue and not the person. And I think sometimes just as human nature, that's hard. You know, we just naturally do those things. If you're not a huge fan of the person, things might be more difficult and so forth. So they say, you know, focus on the issue, not the person. Reduce your emotions, like try not to have all of those extra things involved. And sometimes you just, as a person, you have to adapt, meaning compromise, and sometimes just go with it even if it's not exactly what you want to do. I think we've all been in those situations, or exit the situation. To have a mediator, this might, you know, someone who is your middleman to help you solve conflicts. Now, this might be a bigger issue. It could be, you know, if it's a parent, teacher, but it's important to maybe have the principal there, somebody who can be balanced and level-headed. But it just helps find, or the best way to, you know, the best purpose for a mediator is to help the people find shared interests and try to resolve with a common goal that they have. So this could, I mean, the mediator could be somebody from like your education association. If it, you know, goes that far, it could be a principal, another colleague, an instructional coach, and so forth. So those are a couple ways that you can resolve conflict, and that's through negotiation and mediation. When it comes to problem solving strategies for resistance, we just have to know that conflict and resistance are not, you know, they're not the same thing. Resistance comes when change is hard, and we know that change is hard, and some people are all for it, but some people, you know, they kind of get stuck in their ways, and they, you know, like, what I'm doing is just fine. I don't need to change things. But And I think the reason people are so afraid is because they're afraid of failing. They're not going to understand something. They don't like those changes. But one of the things that you can do to problem solve if people are resistant are using the option of persuasion. And if you come at it with a positive approach, there was a whole list of things in the book, but you can use incentives, especially if it's, you're piloting something new. Sometimes you just need a person who can do those things for you. And I think just as a leader or an administrator or whatever kind of field that you are in, just know that if people are resistant, just show that you can relate to them. And I think that's the biggest thing that you can do. So those are some of the things that we can, as teachers, as educators, administrators, those are some of the things we can do to help problem solve and address conflict and resistance that we might have.